For more than half a century, the mysterious 512-acre stretch of dirt in northeastern Utah known as Skinwalker Ranch was treated as an open-air theater of the bizarre. Researchers, government agents, and curious observers spent thousands of nights staring into the cold desert sky, waiting for phantom lights, unexplained radar returns, and silent aerial phenomena to manifest above the horizon. The prevailing assumption was always that whatever intelligence governed this valley was operating from the heavens above. But buried deep within the classified survey notes of the scientific team was an unsettling realization. The skies were merely an exit point. The true source of the phenomenon had been resting quietly beneath the earth all along. Decades of folklore, combined with recent high-density ground-penetrating radar scans, had long hinted at the existence of a vast, interconnected network of subterranean voids threading beneath the Uinta Basin. Native American legends from the Ute tribe spoke of dark passages beneath the mesa where ancient entities resided, tunnels that were forbidden to enter, sealed away by stone and ritual to keep whatever was trapped inside from bleeding into our world. Modern investigators dismissed these stories as atmospheric myth until heavy equipment operators on the ranch made an accidental structural discovery along the base of the eastern ridge. While clearing rockfall from a previous excavation, the teeth of an excavator bucket didn't strike natural sandstone. They slipped into a hollow subterranean fissure, revealing a sheer, artificially carved shaft plunging straight down into the dark core of the basin. This was not a natural lava tube or a collapsed mine shaft from early settlers. The entry portal was a near-perfect cylinder, 8 feet in diameter, lined with a smooth, dark mineral veneer that bore no tool marks, drill scars, or dynamite fracturing. When the scientific team led by astrophysicist Dr. Travis Taylor and principal investigator Erik lowered multispectral cameras down into the shaft, the footage returned to the monitoring trailers sent a chill through the command site. The tunnel didn't collapse into rough earth after a few feet. It extended horizontally into the deep bedrock, forging a straight, unyielding path directly toward the infamous triangle region of the property. Before any human researcher set foot inside the subterranean shaft, the team initialized a rigorous environmental assessment. They lowered autonomous remote rovers equipped with radiation detectors, thermal imaging arrays, and air sampling mass spectrometers into the abyss. As the tracked rover rolled past the threshold of the tunnel, its telemetry feed began displaying anomalous physical readouts. The air inside the shaft was completely sterile, devoid of biological spores, organic bacteria, or natural moisture. Even more bizarre was the ambient temperature readout. While the surface temperature of the Utah desert hovered around 85 degrees Fahrenheit, the interior of the tunnel maintained a static, unnatural freezing baseline of -15 degrees Celsius, completely uninfluenced by the blistering desert heat above. Then, as the rover reached 50 yards into the subterranean passage, its wireless link to the surface command trailer abruptly collapsed. It wasn't a standard radio signal fade caused by thick rock. Spectrum analyzers logged a sudden, high-amplitude electromagnetic pulse surging from deep within the tunnel wall, locking instantly onto the notorious 1.6 GHz radio band. The signal didn't just interrupt the rover's control link, it hijacked the frequency, feeding a rhythmic, digital binary carrier wave directly back up through the antenna array into the scientific trailer on the surface. The team was no longer looking at an abandoned geological anomaly or an ancient historical ruin. They had uncovered an active, structurally intact subterranean conduit, a buried artery connected directly to the primary energy core of Skinwalker Ranch. Standing around the opening of the dark shaft, listening to the faint, metallic hum vibrating up through the stone, the researchers faced a terrifying decision. They could seal the hole back up and preserve the safety of traditional remote observation, or they could breach the portal and become the first humans in recorded history to step inside the hidden infrastructure beneath the ranch. The decision to send a manned exploration team into the darkness of the subterranean tunnel was not made lightly. Every safety protocol established for the ranch's scientific operations was reevaluated under extreme caution. The team assembled a specialized 3-person entry team equipped with closed-circuit rebreathers, high-intensity ultraviolet floodlights, military-grade radiation shields, and fiber-optic tethered communications to bypass the electromagnetic dead zone suffocating wireless signals below the surface. As the heavy boots of the lead researcher made contact with the floor of the tunnel, the physical sensation was immediate and disorienting. The smooth, dark veneer lining the interior walls was cool to the touch, but it possessed a strange, tactile texture that defied standard geological identification. It wasn't rough sandstone, nor was it polished granite. Under the harsh glare of the ultraviolet floodlights, the walls did not reflect light in standard diffuse patterns. Instead, the material seemed to absorb optical light, casting faint, shimmering iridescence along the curved ceiling, a visual property typically associated with high-tech carbon nanotube matrices or engineered metamaterials. Step by step, the team advanced deeper into the mountain, pulling their armored fiber-optic tether behind them. Inside the command trailer, Erik monitored the live video feed coming from the helmet-mounted cameras. The fiber-optic line allowed clear, uninterrupted, high-definition video to stream directly onto the primary monitors. As the team reached 75 yards from the entry portal, the tunnel's geometry underwent a sudden geometric shift. The perfectly circular cross-section abruptly transitioned into a sharp hexagonal corridor, 8 feet tall and 6 feet wide, carved with absolute mathematical precision through solid bedrock. There were no signs of mechanical excavation, no chisel marks, no scorch lines from thermal lances, and no debris or fallen rock cluttering the floor. The hexagonal passage looked as if it had been melted cleanly through the earth by a directed energy beam operating at millions of degrees. At the 100-yard mark, the lead researcher paused. The team's handheld gaussimeters, designed to measure localized magnetic fields, suddenly pinned at their maximum scales. The magnetic field inside the hexagonal corridor was not uniform. It was pulsating in structured rhythmic waves that swept past the researchers every 8 seconds. With each magnetic pulse, the researchers felt a deep subaudible vibration in their chests, an infrasonic frequency oscillating at precisely 8.1 Hz. This specific frequency matches the fundamental Schumann resonance of Earth's electromagnetic cavity, indicating that the subterranean tunnel was physically locking its operational pulse to the natural resonance of the planet itself. Simultaneously, the air quality sensors on the rebreather units began chiming low-level warnings. The atmospheric pressure inside the hexagonal corridor was rising rapidly, despite the shaft remaining completely open to the surface behind them. The ambient pressure climbed from local baseline up to nearly 2 full atmospheres within a 20-foot span of walking. Moving through the air felt like moving through a dense, invisible fluid, creating a heavy resistive pressure against the researchers' limbs and making every forward step an exhausting physical exertion. Then, the lead helmet camera captured an extraordinary physical barrier spanning the width of the corridor up ahead. Blocking the tunnel was not a wall of collapsed earth or rock fall. Suspended across the hexagonal passage was a semi-translucent, shimmering curtain of cold plasma, a visible field of ionized gas glowing with a faint violet hue. The atmospheric pressure spike and the intense magnetic field were being generated directly by this containment barrier. As the lead researcher extended an insulated thermal probe toward the shimmering violet curtain to test its electrical charge, the probe didn't collide with a solid surface. The tip of the metallic instrument simply dissolved from view as it passed through the plasma barrier, vanishing into a localized distortion where the air behind the curtain appeared completely out of focus. The tunnel wasn't just continuing past the barrier, it was branching off into an expansive, hidden cavern system deep beneath the center of the ranch. The sight of the thermal probe tip vanishing into the out-of-focus space behind the violet plasma curtain brought the entry team to a complete standstill. In the Surface Command trailer, Dr. Travis Taylor stared at the telemetry feeds in absolute awe. The fiber optic line was transmitting data that challenged every known principle of spatial physics. The temperature on the near side of the plasma wall registered a freezing -15 degrees Celsius, but the thermal sensors on the probe tip, which had crossed the boundary, recorded an instantaneous jump to over 40 degrees Celsius, accompanied by a total drop in barometric pressure down to near vacuum levels. The plasma barrier was functioning as a multiphasic environmental airlock, isolating 2 completely different atmospheric environments within the same continuous stone corridor. With extreme caution, the lead investigator stepped through the shimmering violet curtain. The transition was physically disorienting. The heavy, pressurized sensation lifting from his chest was replaced instantly by a feeling of weightlessness. The team's boots, heavily lugged for desert terrain, struggled for traction against a floor that felt frictionless. Beyond the airlock, the narrow hexagonal tunnel opened into a staggering, vast subterranean cavern spanning over 400 feet in diameter. The floodlights mounted on the team's helmets barely scratched the edges of the vast dark void, but as they swept their light beams across the floor and ceiling, the sheer scale of the structure became clear. This was not a natural cavern system carved by water or tectonic shifts. The entire dome was lined with smooth, dark, non-reflective composite panels, the exact same high-density matrix of titanium, aluminum, and ceramic discovered during deep-core drilling into the mesa. Suspended directly in the center of this cavernous underground vault was a colossal metallic structure shaped like an elongated, inverted teardrop, hovering effortlessly 30 feet off the stone floor without any visible supports, cables, or magnetic levitation tracks. The object was massive, easily spanning the length of a commercial airliner, its hull completely seamless and devoid of rivets, windows, or propulsion exhaust ports. Under the ultraviolet floodlights, the surface of the floating craft did not reflect light. Instead, it seemed to absorb the rays, glowing with a faint, bioluminescent pulse that mirrored the rhythmic 8.1 Hz infrasonic vibration echoing through the rock. As the entry team approached the base of the floating craft, their primary radiation detectors chimed violently. The sensors weren't detecting harmful ionizing gamma radiation or nuclear fallout. They were registering high-density streams of non-ionizing terahertz radiation, a frequency band lying between microwaves and infrared light, capable of penetrating solid matter and manipulating atomic structures. The floating craft was actively emitting a powerful, localized field that was bending the gravitational gradient around its perimeter, creating a pocket of zero gravity directly beneath its hull. Suddenly, the continuous 1.6 GHz signal that had been broadcasting through the tunnel network shifted into a high-speed, multi-frequency burst. The audio monitors inside the researchers' helmets caught a sharp, high-pitched warble that rapidly dropped into a deep, synthesized rhythmic tone. Simultaneously, the dark composite panels lining the dome wall of the vast cavern began to illuminate sequentially, displaying vast, geometric patterns of light that swept around the perimeter of the room like a massive, automated startup sequence. The entry team hadn't just discovered an ancient subterranean vessel buried beneath the Uinta Basin. By breaching the plasma airlock and introducing external thermal energy into the sterile vault, they had triggered an automated waking sequence. The craft suspended in the center of the cavern was beginning to draw raw power from deep mineral aquifers beneath the valley floor, initializing an internal core that had remained dormant for thousands of years. The sequential ignition of the geometric light arrays along the cavern dome cast a blinding, iridescent sheen over the floating craft. The dark composite panels lining the 400-foot vault were no longer passive walls. They were functioning as a massive parabolic energy reflector, focusing ambient electromagnetic waves directly into the belly of the suspended vessel. Inside the command trailer on the surface, Erik watched as every monitor fed by the subterranean fiber optic link went into complete data saturation. The real-time telemetry streaming from the entry team's suits showed that the localized gravitational anomaly beneath the craft was expanding rapidly. The pocket of zero gravity was no longer confined to the area directly underneath the hull. It was sweeping outward in concentric rings across the cavern floor, lifting loose dust, lost equipment, and heavy rock fragments into smooth, orbital paths around the floating vessel. The researchers inside the vault found themselves suddenly weightless, suspended 6 feet off the stone floor, tethered to reality only by the heavy fiber optic cable anchored near the entry tunnel. Despite the panic rising in their chests, the entry team kept their camera systems pointed directly at the craft's lower fuselage. As the energy density inside the vault reached critical levels, a section of the smooth, seamless hull began to alter its physical state. The ultra-dense metallic alloy didn't slide open or retract on mechanical hinges. It dissolved, transitioning from a solid metal state into a viscous, liquid-like mercury sheen before parting cleanly to form an open, oval doorway 6 feet high. The interior of the craft was completely exposed to human eyes for the first time in history. The lead researcher, using the fiber optic cable to guide his momentum through the zero-gravity field, maneuvered himself toward the glowing oval opening. As his helmet camera crossed the threshold of the doorway, the video feed broadcast back to the surface trailer revealed a command deck that defied every principle of human ergonomics and industrial design. There were no control panels, no physical switches, no mechanical flight sticks, and no display screens. The interior walls were lined with a smooth, dark, organic material that appeared to flex and pulse in direct synchronization with the 8.1 Hz infrasonic hum. Suspended in the center of the bridge was a single, crystal-like column of concentrated light, a dense, multifaceted pillar of pale cyan energy, hovering between 2 polished metallic spheres embedded in the floor and ceiling. This was not a cockpit designed for physical human operators manipulating manual controls. It was a consciousness-driven neural interface, a vehicle engineered to be piloted via direct electromagnetic alignment with an operator's nervous system. As the lead investigator reached out a gloved hand to stabilize himself against the doorway frame, his proximity to the central light column triggered an immediate response from the craft's core systems. The pale cyan light pillar flared with intense brightness, sweeping a high-frequency optical laser across the researcher's visor. Instantly, the audio feed inside the command trailer picked up an avalanche of structured digital information streaming across the 1.6 GHz radio band, not in binary, but in a complex, multi-layered mathematical code based on prime numbers and fractal geometry. The craft was attempting to establish a diagnostic handshake. It was scanning the genetic, neurological, and technological footprint of the human intruding upon its deck, attempting to verify if the species standing inside its command bridge possessed the specific bioelectric signature required to unlock its operational core. And as the optical scanner finished its sweep, the deep infrasonic hum, echoing through the mountain, suddenly dropped into a sharp, resonant frequency that shook the very bedrock of the entire Uinta Basin. The sharp resonant frequency that tore through the bedrock of the Uinta Basin sent shockwaves radiating far beyond the immediate perimeter of Skinwalker Ranch. On the surface, seismometers monitored by the United States Geological Survey picked up a distinct, non-tectonic harmonic pulse originating precisely 400 feet below the valley floor. It wasn't an earthquake characterized by chaotic shear waves. It was a pure, sustained sinusoidal tone that rang through the Earth's crust like a struck tuning fork. Inside the floating vessel's command deck, the lead researcher was momentarily paralyzed as the pale cyan light pillar completed its high-density optical sweep. The digital stream broadcasting on the 1.6 GHz spectrum suddenly altered its internal architecture. The complex mathematical code, previously composed of abstract prime numbers and fractal geometry, began rapidly re-encoding itself into a recognizable electromagnetic language. The craft was actively modulating its output to match the precise signal protocols of modern human communications networks. Outside the vessel, within the vast composite-lined cavern, the zero-gravity field reached its absolute maximum density threshold. The three members of the entry team watched in terrifying awe as the heavy stone fragments and dust particles floating around them suddenly aligned into clean, geometric orbital planes, resembling the planetary rings of Saturn spinning in perfect frictionless harmony around the central hull. The physics governing the room had been completely rewritten. Mass, weight, and momentum were no longer static constants. They were dynamic variables controlled by the vessel's internal propulsion core. Then, from deep within the central floor of the cavern, directly beneath the floating craft, a secondary structural mechanism initialized. A massive circular section of the smooth composite floor, measuring nearly 50 feet in diameter, began to descend smoothly into a lower subterranean level. As the circular platform lowered, it revealed a sprawling multi-tiered complex extending even deeper into the earth. Illuminated by the pale cyan glow emanating from the craft above, the entry team peered down into a subterranean hangar network containing dozens of similar vaulted chambers branching off into the dark, unexplored depths beneath the mesa. Skinwalker Ranch was not housing a single isolated crashed craft or a solitary abandoned observation post. The entire valley was sitting directly on top of a massive, fully integrated subterranean staging facility. A hardened, ancient fleet repository buried hundreds of feet beneath the desert, engineered to preserve advanced extraterrestrial technology across millennia of geological time. Inside the surface command trailer, Dr. Travis Taylor recognized that the situation was escalating toward a point of irreversible critical mass. The power draw being pulled from the deep regional mineral aquifers was beginning to destabilize the localized power grid of the surrounding municipality. Electrical transformers miles away along the basin highway were humming under sudden inductive feedback loops, while sky watchers along the ridgeline reported a massive, glowing violet aurora forming in a completely clear, cloudless night sky directly over the triangle. If the craft inside the vault fully engaged its propulsion core while trapped within the atmospheric airlock, the resulting electromagnetic discharge would strip the surface soil of all electrical insulation, triggering a catastrophic ground arc event capable of vaporizing the command facility above. Communicating through the fiber optic tether, Dr. Taylor issued an urgent, absolute order to the entry team inside the vault. Terminate the optical handshake, withdraw from the craft's command deck immediately, and retreat past the plasma containment barrier before the secondary power loop fully locked into place. Unwilling to risk a total catastrophic discharge, the lead researcher pulled his body back from the oval doorway frame, using the fiber optic line to haul himself backward through the zero-gravity field. But as his boots cleared the doorway of the craft, the vessel's internal cyan light pillar didn't extinguish. It shifted its focal point from the command deck, casting its intense, directed beam straight down through the open floor aperture into the vast, dark fleet repository below, initiating a chain reaction startup sequence across the entire subterranean complex. The chain reaction startup sequence, cascading through the lower repository, turned the subterranean complex into a terrifying furnace of raw electromagnetic energy. Deep beneath the cavern floor, sequential rows of ancient vaulted chambers illuminated one by one, casting blinding geometric patterns of pale cyan and deep ultraviolet light up through the central floor aperture. The entry team, pulling themselves furiously along the fiber optic tether through the zero-gravity field, could feel the very air inside their suits vibrating as the secondary fleet vessels spooled up their internal propulsion cores in perfect synchronization. In the surface command trailer, Erik watched the real-time telemetry from the tethered sensors hit critical red lines across every diagnostic array. The baseline magnetic field within the 400-foot vault had skyrocketed past 20 teslas, a field strength powerful enough to distort the molecular bonds of standard metals and tear unshielded electronics to shreds. On the surface, directly above the vault, the ground began to ripple visually under the intense gravitational gradient. Desert sagebrush, heavy boulders, and iron fence posts along the triangle were pulled into a localized spatial distortion, shimmering like objects submerged in deep water, as the mountain above struggled to contain the subterranean energy loop. Recognizing that the team had mere seconds before the plasma airlock collapsed under the escalating pressure, the lead researcher reached the edge of the hexagonal corridor. With a final, desperate exertion against the weightless field, the three team members hurled themselves backward through the shimmering violet curtain of the atmospheric lock. The transition was instant and violent. As their boots struck the pressurized floor of the hexagonal tunnel, the heavy double-atmosphere air slammed back into their lungs, while the freezing -15-degree temperature chilled their thermal suits instantly. The moment the last researcher cleared the boundary, the plasma curtain underwent a rapid defensive transformation. The pale violet glow intensified into a blinding opaque wall of white-hot plasma, sealing the hexagonal corridor completely shut. The containment field didn't just block physical passage, it created an absolute acoustic and electromagnetic seal, severing the fiber-optic telemetry stream instantly and plunging the tunnel behind the researchers into total, heavy silence. The chaotic roar of the ancient fleet warming up its engines, the subaudible 8.1 Hz infrasonic thrum, and the piercing 1.6 GHz radio warble collapsed simultaneously into complete baseline stillness. Stumbling back up the dark, 600-foot shaft toward the surface entry portal, the entry team emerged into the cool desert night air, exhausted, disoriented, and forever changed by what they had witnessed in the deep core of the basin. Surrounding the tunnel entrance on the surface, Dr. Travis Taylor and the remaining scientific crew stood in stunned silence. The glowing violet aurora that had blanketed the cloudless sky over the triangle was gone, drawn cleanly back down into the earth like water draining into a whirlpool. The surface magnetometers had returned to normal terrestrial levels, and the ground-penetrating radar arrays showed these subterranean fissures settling back into a dormant, non-conductive state. The ancient complex had not detonated, nor had it launched its vessels into the sky. Having verified the presence of human intelligence and scanned the technological footprint of the researchers, the subterranean facility had completed its diagnostic handshake, secured its internal perimeter behind impenetrable plasma barriers, and returned to a state of hyper-vigilant readiness, waiting for humanity to return with the key to unlock its true purpose. The physical breach and exploration of the subterranean vault beneath Skinwalker Ranch marks an unprecedented turning point in our understanding of human history and our place in the cosmos. For over half a century, the public narrative was consumed by flashes of light in the Utah night sky, mysterious cattle mutilations, and transient radar blips. Humanity was trapped in a mindset of passive observation, assuming we were merely helpless witnesses to occasional fleeting visits from deep space. Now, the cold physical reality brought to light by Dr. Travis Taylor, Erik and their scientific team has shattered that delusion forever. The vast hexagonal corridors, the self-sustaining plasma airlocks, the zero-gravity environmental chambers, and the suspended, consciousness-driven vessel hovering above a vast fleet repository prove that Skinwalker Ranch is not an isolated hotspot for strange phenomena. It is the surface gateway to a massive hardened extraterrestrial infrastructure, an ancient planetary installation engineered to endure for thousands of years beneath the Uinta Basin, completely hidden beneath layers of solid bedrock. Whether this subterranean complex represents an ancient monitoring outpost left behind to safeguard the planet, or a strategic forward installation waiting for a specific cosmic threshold to initialize its fleet, one fundamental truth is now absolute. It is intact, it is operational, and it is actively reacting to our technological advancement. When the human entry team crossed the threshold of that floating craft and triggered the optical diagnostic sweep, they didn't just survive an incredible scientific encounter. They completed a localized handshake that had remained open for millennia. The automated systems buried deep beneath the Earth did not react with hostility. They assessed our technological footprint, calibrated their telemetry to match our radio protocols, and executed a controlled defensive lockdown to preserve their power reserves until the next interaction. As the research team on the surface processes the massive archive of electromagnetic, spatial, and gravitational data retrieved from that subterranean breach, the message emerging from the Utah desert is clear. The greatest discoveries in human history will not come from staring passively into the distant cosmos. They are waiting beneath our boots, locked behind ancient barriers, ready to redefine everything we know about physics, consciousness, and the true origins of our world. If this mind-bending journey into the secret subterranean tunnels of Skinwalker Ranch gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update as this investigation continues to push the boundaries of science. Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe the subterranean fleet buried beneath the ranch was built to protect Earth, or is it waiting for a signal to reclaim it? Share your theories in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and stay curious.